Hey guys, it's Holly here, and before we jump into today's episode, I want to invite you to join us on September 24th for our webinar, How to Craft a Great Job Description. Go to westaffthechurch.com, that's westaffthechurch.com to register now.
Church leaders need intentional development to help them discover their capacity.
When studying leadership, it can be easy to stereotype leaders with large numbers. The truth is, some people have an innate ability to be inspired.
And once you outgrow your support system, really your growth is very fragile and it's probably going to drop off in a lot of places.
Welcome to the Vanderbloemen Leadership Podcast, where we talk about how to build, run, and keep great teams. I'm your host, Holly Tate, and on today's episode, William talks with Pastor Nicole Crank. Pastor Nicole and Pastor David Crank are the senior pastors of Faith Church in St. Louis, Missouri. In today's episode, William talks with Pastor Nicole about church planning, doing ministry with your spouse, and team building in a fast growth environment. Be sure to tweet along with us using the hashtag Vandercast. That's hashtag Vandercast. Let's jump in.
Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for letting us into your iPhone or Android or whatever you're listening to the podcast on today. We're so glad to have Nicole Crank here. Nicole, tell us about Faith Church. Tell our listeners just what's going on in St. Louis.
Well, hey, thanks, William, and thanks for inviting me to be on the podcast and listening to a bunch of leaders from all over the place just pour into church planners, and it's just an honor to be here with you today. Faith Church is a church that started in 2004 when David's dad got promoted to heaven very unexpectedly. David was his worship leader, and I had been in the corporate world, and so we had about 180 people coming to church faithfully every week, and we just wanted to know, how do we not disappoint these 180 people? How do we keep this going? I hope we can keep this going for them. I'm not sure if we can. And we just started doing that in 2004, and in 2005, God just started speaking some direction to us to take the ministry a different direction than it had been in the past, and started implementing. We had kind of the same 180 people every week. We started reaching out. We started broadening our minds. We started trying to answer questions people were actually asking instead of maybe the more religious questions. And we just started growing, and by 2007, we had 2,000 folks. And we had added a campus in 2008. We bought another building in 2011. We launched a campus in West Palm Beach in 2014. We bought a third campus in St. Louis in 2014. And this past Easter, we had about 18,000 folks at Faith Church. So we outgrew our space for 180 people just a little bit.
By 100-fold, huh?
Kind of, sort of, yeah.
I think I just got tired listening to that. That's amazing. Talk to us a little bit about what it's like to do ministry. I mean, you guys didn't plant the church, but you pretty much planted the church. I mean, I don't want to dishonor David's father's work. It's a great ministry, but the church that's there now, it stands on those shoulders, but it's kind of a brand new church. So your husband and wife team, and you go into ministry together. Talk to us a little bit about what you guys have done as a couple to sort of make it work. I mean, that's taking your work home all the time. And I mean, that's got to be a big stress. So talk to us a little bit about why it's worked for you guys.
Well, we actually had a conversation about that today, William, and I guess that's the thing, is you just can't be scared of the hard conversations, especially when it comes to marriage. If you're working with your spouse, we had one of those, and I say hard conversations. It's just sometimes transparency, honesty can leave you feeling vulnerable, but without that vulnerability, especially in a marriage, the marriage can fall apart. So just remaining so trusting in your spouse to love you even when they see you fail more than a regular spouse does. I mean, if you burn dinner, your spouse knows. If you yell at the kids, your spouse knows. If you forget to mow the grass, your spouse knows. But if you go to work and you forget a report, they don't know that stuff unless you work with them. So there's an additional vulnerability that goes for that, but being willing to be vulnerable in front of each other and to love each other through even more failures than before, that I think that's one of the things that we've just worked on and continue to work on through 18 years of marriage.
That's awesome. And one of the things, having worked with you guys in the past, I know that you're very, very good at sort of, if we're hiring a pastor or if you're looking at a pastor candidate, you guys show an enormous proficiency at assessing their spouse. So talk to me a little bit about, let's just assume most of the time the person that's getting interviewed for a pastoral job is a guy. It doesn't have to be that way, but percentages would be most of the time it's a guy. How do you assess a wife that you're looking at as a potential pastor's wife and say, this is going to work or this isn't?
Well, sure. I know you guys are helping us with a search right now with our children's pastor position. And the gentleman came in to interview for the position, and our team didn't bring his spouse in. And we were like, how did this even happen? Because that's just kind of our normal method of operation. Because really, when you get married, the Bible says the two become one. And so you can't expect to hire half of a person or half of a relationship. That other spouse, that other half of the relationship, that spouse or that wife is going to speak into their performance at work. Are they going to go home and have to defend themselves because they were gone during the day earning a living? Or are they going to go home and be encouraged to go into ministry, go into the kingdom and fight hell and win people to Jesus? So that other person really kind of determines whether that person has to go home and work some more or goes home and gets filled up and is able to pour into their family.
That's awesome. Have you found any good questions to ask a potential pastor's spouse that help you understand whether that's going to work or not?
I think sometimes people know the answers to questions. So for us, it's not necessarily the language, but it's watching them interact together. Does she respect him to answer a question? Does he give her latitude when she does answer a question and let her, does he respect her to flow in her gifting or answer something? Is there a mutual respect between them? Just watching them together in a room it speaks volumes to us. So I know a lot of folks maybe interview the spouse separately, and sometimes we do that on some levels of our interview process. When we interview, you have to pass the whole team's interview, so you'll probably go through at least 6 interviews at Faith Church. But watching them together, for Pastor David and I, that's one of the things that we really enjoy doing, and that makes us feel comfortable or uncomfortable in their marriage relationship.
That's awesome. So as you guys have grown in a very short period of time, you've gone through a lot of different growth barriers. There's the 800 mark and the 2,000 mark and all those different. Think back to a time that you said, this is a really hard barrier to break, and just describe how you guys navigated the waters of being in a whole new kind of church.
Yeah, actually, when you're asking that question, it just made me smile, because I would say that there's constantly a barrier that seems difficult to break. Because no matter where you're at, you know where you want to be all the time, right? And it's that struggle, hashtag the struggle, or that balance between being, satisfied where you are without being content to stay there. So there's that constant struggle with knowing there's so many more people to reach all the time. And, so we're starting Sunday services in West Palm Beach. So that's a whole new thing for us. And, we're a little bit nervous and we're a little bit stressed and we're a lot excited and we know it's going to be great. But there's constantly for us those barriers. I would never say that there's just specific numbers for us personally. I would say any time that things start to almost gel under our feet, we move so quickly at Faith Church. That's just kind of our culture is a culture of being on the go, on the move, and moving forward. That anytime the ground starts to really get solid under our feet, we start to wonder, why haven't we moved? And then I would say it comes from maybe not knowing that next step we're supposed to take. And I would love to tell you that, I know that there's a lot of church leaders out there that are phenomenal business people. They have amazing business plans. And I'd like to tell you that we're just super smart like that. And that's how that we've been so successful. But honestly, William, I would tell you that so much of Faith Church's success has been based on prayer, has been based on fasting, not good ideas, because good ideas aren't always God ideas. You might have a million good ideas in ministry, but it was a really great senior pastor once said, it's not the God ideas that killed me, it's the good ideas that killed me. I never got in trouble doing what God told me to do. So, just us really waiting on God to give us that confirmation in our heart on which direction we were supposed to move forward. And I'm not saying it was easy. We go home and talk about something that's happened at church almost every night. But I will tell you that having that confidence that we know that we're marching the direction God wants us to go gives us that strength, when otherwise we'd probably just fall into bed and go, do I have to get up tomorrow?
That's awesome. So talk to us a little bit about team building in a fast growth environment. I mean, we have this happening here. Every staff meeting, we have somebody new around. You guys probably have 5 new people every time you have a meeting. How do you keep the team glued together when it's changing all the time in rapid growth?
Man, that's an excellent question, William, because actually it's one of our biggest challenges is you can only grow the church as quickly as you can grow the support system. And once you outgrow your support system, really your growth is very fragile and it's probably going to drop off in a lot of places. One of the things that we started recently is something we call a culture infusion. And that's just taking a staff meeting. And we have weekly-ish staff meetings. It's on everybody's calendar every week, but there will be maybe 1 week out of the month that we'll cancel. After Labor Day, we're not going to have staff meeting. And we'll do what we call a culture infusion. And we'll talk about things like, it won't make sense right now, but I'll say the Brad Apple, the trash can story, tapping out, what's your main job? How do you set up a new VIP to win? What is a weekly reach out? What is an amen corner? How is your amen corner? No PCO before you go. So it'll be those types of things that our language, when we hit that language and, we say don't be a Brad Apple, that means nothing unless you've kind of been indoctrinated in the faith church culture. So we're actually kind of almost quarterly re-infusing our culture intentionally to our staff.
I think culture probably trumps strategy or anything else you can do. If you can keep the culture, you can keep it. You can keep everything humming along. So when you infuse that culture in, if you're thinking, our listeners out there are constantly asking, how can I build my culture with my staff? You got any pointers about how a pastor at a church that's probably not got 18,000, but a little smaller setting and maybe not growing quite so quickly, what are some key steps for them to build great culture with their staff?
Well, I think sometimes things like mission statements or growth statements or vision statements or core values can be just a little bit intimidating because they're almost written in stone a little bit. And so I think people get so slow to actually cement those that maybe they don't move their culture as quickly as it needs to be moved or changed. So culture is something that, you buy your clothes from H&M and you don't spend a lot of money on them because, in 2 seasons they're going to be totally out. Culture can be that way. Culture can move and culture can change. It's very fluid. So I don't think we have to be as scared of the culture or a culture shift or culture migration or improvement as we do as a core value change or improvement. So I think thinking of culture as something that's more fluid, I think that isn't as scary to communicate the things that we want.
That's awesome. Can you tell us something about what it's like to be a woman in leadership in a church? Because, you're co-pastor of the church. And typically, if you look at Christendom all across the country, that's not the norm, right? So do you run into roadblocks, or how have you found it to be as a woman in ministry that's in a pretty high power place?
Sometimes it can be a little bit interesting. A pastor's wife is not one defined role in our culture. A pastor's wife can be called to many different things just because she's the pastor's wife. Being the pastor's wife, you're automatically in full-time ministry. There is no way to tap out on that. But you might be a pastor's wife called for a certain amount of time to be at home pouring into your children. It doesn't make you any less of a pastor's wife. You're still the pastor's wife, a culture setter and a raiser, a person who raises up others and raises others to life and pulls them closer to Christ. My particular role as a pastor's wife also happens to be as a senior pastor. And sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I think like the boys just a little bit because I find myself sitting at the boys' table sometimes. But I think it really is so individual and so individualistic to just removing gender from the role if you can at all, and just be who you were called to be, regardless of your gender role. Just what did God call you to, and then do that with all your might. Did God call you to raise your children? Do that, because you might have the next Billy Graham Jr. in your living room, and that could be the greatest role for you in all the world, is who's going to make sure that child fulfills their role. So I don't think one role is more important than the other. I think it's just really important to really get with God and know your role. And if you play that role, your reward in heaven is going to be as big as Billy Graham's, because you did what you were called to do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So one of the things that you guys do better than almost anybody I've seen is message series preparation, stage build out. if you like visuals, you ought to go to Faith Church because it's pretty amazing. Tell us what you're doing right now in a series. I mean, something cool going on the stage, I'm sure. Just give an idea to the pastors out there.
Well, we're in the middle of a set change. Go figure, right? We start a new series when in September when we launch Sundays in West Palm Beach. We're starting a new series called Bridges, and the 4 weeks are burning bridges, which, yeah, we're going to have to work with the fire department that week. Literally, building bridges, bridging the gap, and braving bridges. And originally, part of the plan was to get me to jump out of an airplane to talk about braving the bridge. And, as we checked into that, I decided, hey, I have a torn meniscus in my knee healing. Maybe we'll pass on that. But David and I are both very visual thinkers. That just happens to be the way we learn. So in learning, a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about how unforgiveness can be a sticky situation. So I stepped into some rain boots in a little toddler's blow-up pool, put on a raincoat, and pulled the hood over my head and covered myself in syrup on the raincoat while I was talking and stuck like paper towels to me, Mildred and Bob and the people that we carry around with us. And when we're all sticky like that, all this funkiness, so I threw up some feathers and they stuck to me. They stick to us, and we don't think we look weird at all. But if I come up to you and I'll say, hug me, hold me, you don't want to. So those are those word pictures that we actually turn into pictures just because we think that way.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. And, Nicole, I don't think people understand just how far your life has come, your story. It's a powerful witness. And I know there are pastors out there listening right now that are saying, my life is so messed up, there's no way God can use me to do great things. Would you mind sharing with us a little bit of your story and how God's worked through your life?
Well, the Bible says God uses the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and that's the only reason I can even understand, God, why did you pick me? And, in 1 Samuel 10, Saul is really trying to get out of being chosen. He's hiding among the baggage. He's not showing up when they're passing the people through. And he knows he's been chosen as king. But I really think it's because he doubted the call of God on his life, just because he was the smallest guy from the smallest tribe of all of Israel. And it's kind of the way I feel a little bit because, I was molested when I was in 4th grade. I was raped when I was in 8th grade. And I was given up by my father before I was born, adopted when I was 3. And that led to a whole string of just bad decisions and mistrust as I was really cementing my relationship and finding Christ, not as a kid, but on my own level, like for real, later in life. And when I found Christ, he changed things. And I didn't know that he was going to actually use the pain in my life to be a platform that I could stand on. I really thought the pain in my life was something that I was going to be burdened with, have to carry on my shoulders. But Christ is the only one who can take that pain off of your shoulders, literally put it underneath your feet for you to stand on and give you something to talk about. And that's what he did with me. So, at Faith Church, I'd love to tell you, hey, we have these PhDs and call me Dr. Nicole. But really, I've been taught through life the goodness, the mercy, and the grace of God. And that's the platform that David and I can stand on, is just how good God is to messed up people, and that's he and I. And if he's this good to us and he gives us a microphone, my goodness, how much of a chance does everybody in the world have? So I would just say, pastor, leader in your business, don't let your past be a shackle. Don't let your past hold you down. And don't try and be anybody else. Don't mimic. Don't be a parrot. Don't be like, okay, raincoat, check. Syrup, check. This is the way I'm going to roll. You have a unique voice and a unique calling and a unique past that nobody else has. And if you will be who God called you to be the way he called you to do it, that's the only way you're going to be unique. And it's the only way you're going to make a different sound that's going to be something that people will pay attention to, because people are already doing the things they're doing. Don't try and be like them. They've done that. Be what God's calling you to do, and he'll help you to make a new sound that will attract attention that nobody else is making that sound. And that's going to attract people who've never found Christ or never had anyone to follow because they didn't get anybody else, but they'll get you.
That's very good word. Solid. Hey, as we wrap up our time together, I always have these 3 questions that I ask all of our guests, and it's fascinating to hear the spread of things. One is, tell us something you're reading that is really just kind of energizing you that our listeners would like. And the ground rules I think all our listeners know is you can't say the Bible and you can't say good to great. That kind of covers the two genres, right?
I'm a schizophrenic reader, so I read about 6 books at one time. I would say one of my favorite books right now is called Secrets of the Secret Place. Everything in that book doesn't, I'm not like, I believe everything in this book 127%, but I believe most everything in that book is rocking my soul. Wow. And so it makes me want to be with Jesus more. So I really love that book.
That's great. And then another thing we ask people, and this doesn't have to be serious, it can be a fun thing. Tell us an app you've downloaded recently that you're like, now that, I'm hitting that on my phone pretty regular.
I'm terrible because I'm kind of a workaholic and work is my fun. So I'm terrible at apps. The newest app I just put on my phone, Church Metrics. So I think the guys over there in Oklahoma, Craig Rochelle, Bobby Grunwald, and the team are rocking that for churches everywhere. It's a free resource, and, I'm a sucker for a sale. What is better than free? And then Periscope, my husband is nailing this Periscope thing, and I'm just trying to be more mindful to get on it. But I think Periscope is a way to connect in real time, and it's so authentic and so organic. You can't stage that very well because it's live streamed. There is no editing happening there. You can't put a filter on it. So I think that's pretty cool.
That is cool. And last question, we ask everybody, think back for me something from the blooper reel in worship. Our pastors out there often listen to this on Monday or Tuesday, and the first part of the week can be a little depressing. So help them realize they're not the only ones that mess up. What's a time that you didn't go very well on stage?
Oh, goodness and mercy. There's just, let me count the ways. One of the things we do, we have a Saturday night service, and we record it and we use it. And one of the least favorite things to do is to do the Saturday night service and then say, I need to do it again. And we do the Saturday night service again. And here's the thing. As soon as you get done with the Saturday night service, you wait for the auditorium to clear out and all that, especially if you're going to shoot it again. And you're upstairs in the office dying 1,000 deaths. Like, now I've got to ask a few people to stay. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this. I'm a failure. And then you go downstairs, and those people who did stay to hear it a second time, those few reach outs that the team will make, you walk into that room and somehow they make you feel like a king. It's just the love that you feel when you walk into that room. So the cool thing about that is in the point that you feel like you failed the worst, those people just heard what we feel like, the rest of the world can't even see that. We just have to ditch that right now. And you walk in the room and they stand up and clap and cheer. And that's the part we don't see. People go home from church, and we don't see them after they get home, and we don't see them in the parking lot. And a lot of times, if we've got another service back-to-back, you might not get to see them after the service. But people are clapping and cheering for you behind your back, even when you think you failed the worst. And I think that's what we forget on Monday and Tuesday.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for being with us, Nicole, and bless you guys. Everybody check out Faith Church. Holly's going to point you towards some resources and websites and social media to follow. Nicole, you've been a blessing, and we're honored to have you on the show.
Oh, man, thanks so much for having us, and thanks for helping us the way that you have, William.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. You can connect with us on Twitter at Vanderbloemen SG and hashtag your key takeaways with hashtag Vandercast. You can also receive more information about what we do here at Vanderbloemen Search Group and notes from today's podcast at vanderbloemen.com/podcast. See you next time.